In this video, we're going to be talking about the difference between var, let, and const. This is a common problem for beginners, so let's talk about it. The first common difference is the scope. Var is function scope, while let and const are block scope. What that simply means is that when you want to create a local scope for the var variable, you can only do that using a function. Whereas for let and const, you can use any block statement like an if statement, a while loop, even a function, etc. As long as there's a curly brace, you immediately create a local scope for let and const. Another difference is how they are being hoisted. For var, it is hoisted and initialized to undefined at the beginning. Whereas for let and const, they are also being hoisted, but then the attempt has not been initialized, although behind the scene they are being injected into the temporal dead zone, which means you can't reference them. So for var, variables declared using var, you can reference the variable before the point where it is declared, whereas for let and const, you can't do that. It's going to throw a reference error. Another thing to note is the reassignment. var, you can always reassign. Let is meant to be reassigned, while const, on the other hand, you can't reassign, so it is assumed as a constant. But this behavior is for the runtime of your program. It being constant doesn't mean you can't literally change the value in your code. Obviously that works. But during the runtime of your program, the value would not change. The other thing to note is redeclaration. So for var, you can unfortunately declare the variable twice for some reason, but that's not the case for let and const. In fact, it was one of the arguments that brought about these guys. Then initialization requirements. For var, it is optional because you can obviously initialize it later on. Same thing for let, but for const, that is not the case, because once you declare the variable, if you do not initialize it immediately, you can't initialize it later on in the future. So global object property. Var is being attached to the global object. In the browser, that is a window, so you most likely find the var variable as a property of the window object, while it is not so for let and const. Then the use case, you generally should avoid using var as of now, okay? But let is what you use when you know there's going to be change for that variable, and const is what you use when there is no possibility of change in the future. A rule of thumb is to always use const until it is required to use let. In essence, the data is going to change in the future. So you should have more const than let in your code, basically. I hope you find this video very useful, and I'll see you in the very next one.